Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to the another episode of the Muslim Bitcoiner podcast, where we are joined again by Muaawiyah Tucker, who recently just came back from the Satoshi Roundtable. So today we'll be discussing the sessions in the last day, and Muaawiyah will also talk about the presentation that he gave on that day as well. So Muaawiyah Tucker, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thanks for having me again. Just some slight correction. It wasn't the last day. It was a Sunday. So the last day would have been Monday. It was like a day for everyone. But then the last day for the conference presentation thing was on the Sunday.
Okay.
And we began, so the first part of the day, or we began at, I think it was about 9:30. And there were a few different topics that took place during that day. One of the first ones that I attended was in regards to AI, the use of AI in education, which is really interesting.
Hmm.
So essentially, what he was saying was is that they use artificial intelligence, and essentially, and he did say kind of like off the cuff that they draw in a lot of data from the user, including like how they look and how they move and how their eyes are and all that kind of stuff, and they use that to tailor the educational experience using AI, so they can basically
Hmm.
help engage them, keep them active and occupied, and focus onto the lesson and whatnot. That
Hmm.
was interesting, and it was talking about the use of AI. It wasn't really a crypto or Bitcoin-esque thing, but
Right.
obviously it was definitely important for, I would say, the future, because I think we're seeing at the moment the convergence, I would say, of or the not a convergence, the emergence of certain key technologies.
Hmm.
Blockchain or Bitcoin or whatever you want to call that. That's a thing, which basically means the transfer of value on the internet, on the network. Artificial intelligence, which is again, you say the synthesis of information, or the instant or quick or fast synthesization of information. There was a third one. There was that one, and there's a third one that had AI, money transfer. Oh, and I think Nostra is going to be another key one, another key layer in all of this thing. So in terms of decentralized communications,
Hmm.
so I think these things are going to be really important in the next 5 to 10 years,
Right.
and I think might even be like the basis of the next wave of things. So number one, you've got the transfer of money that facilitates a whole lot of things. Number two, you've got the artificial intelligence, which is a very helpful tool for human beings to get productive. I mean, if you can imagine what we were able to achieve when we discovered Google. I mean, before Google, well, how did we access the internet? We didn't.
Hmm.
With Google, we were able to access, search, draw together different things in different parts of the world, and that leapfrogged us, you could say, and communications. So at the moment, everything is becoming very centralized in terms of we have your Facebooks and your Twitters and your big behemoths of information. But and with that, we've seen in most recent years a lot of issues of censorship and kind of stuff, and the
Hmm.
algorithm and your data being sold and harvested. But I think with Nostra, I think we're going to start seeing something very different, where you can have communications that are not on centralized services and companies. So I think that was important. But anyway, that was
Okay.
that one. And do you have any questions on that one?
No, I think those are great things to talk about. Like you said, I mean, not all of it, especially like the AI part, isn't necessarily so much about like Bitcoin or blockchain or whatever. But yeah, I do see AI, especially being able to help people be more productive. A lot of people are kind of scared about AI like replacing jobs or like replacing how we do things. But I see AI as like a helpful tool, like just for even like for me sometimes like I use like Chat GPT sometimes to just I was playing around with it with my 5-year-old of like coming up with a story or something. So I'll get like my 5-year-old to like give me prompts to come up with a story so I could get like an AI to come up with just like a few sentences of a story. And he thought that was so neat. Just dumb things like that I think are really helpful in not just being more productive but also helpful in learning. And it's kind of disappointing to see that a lot of educators are kind of skeptical and kind of very dismissive of like using AI in the classroom to help children learn. And I don't know. That's just something that I was thinking about the other day of like how cool it is to have AI not just help us be more productive, but also to help us in education and learning and teaching as well. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to say on that.
One interesting thing that happened, you mentioned that with Google. Apparently, they programmed an AI to learn how to trade and invest, and they gave it $100,000 and left it for a couple of months to see what it could do. And
Hmm.
apparently, that $100,000 turned into something like more than $100 million. Um,
Wow.
and that was a loss that they informed us of what they had done. So no one knows if it continued doing what it was doing or not. But
Wow.
I can imagine AI being responsible for maybe that's what caused FTX in it.
Yeah, it's pretty scary
Who
the
knows?
the possibilities with AI, but it's definitely an interesting technology to watch out for sure.
Definitely. So just to go through some of the names of some of the things that were happening at that time. I didn't attend all of those topics, but it was just different things like tokenization, things like NFTs and the future and crypto and raising infrastructure, something like that. KYC, the role of technology in compliance. That was another interesting topic. That was the next one. But yeah, so
Hmm.
that was that hour. The next one I went to was the issue of compliance. That was a very important point. So in terms of regulation and compliance. So what was interesting about that one was that we had one exchange, kind of a person who works in behind an exchange. So he kind of gave us some of the inside info about how exchanges deal with privacy-based coins. So imagine you put your coin through a coin join and you cleaned up what kind of stuff. What kind of analytics do they do? So
Hmm.
exchange, he said, exchanges they do analytics on coins that come in, but they don't. Well, he's his one. They don't tend to care what happens once you leave. So some exchanges, I think one person said, well, so that Coinbase, they do seem to monitor what you do after you've left. But he said in his one, they don't care. All they care about is when it comes in, and they'll flag it, and then they'll make a report for anti-money laundering, and then they'll, you might, they won't even tell you if you get flagged. Procedures not even to tell you. They'll just forward your details onto someone else, and then you get investigated that way. So there is that issue of
Hmm.
privacy with
Okay.
exchanges, which is I guess to be expected.
Yeah.
But the main focus of the discussion was to do with coin joins, privacy, how to, I guess, operate on a Bitcoin network with privacy, and
Hmm.
what does that mean in terms of interacting with regulators, that kind of stuff.
I see.
That was that one. Come on. So the next topic, so list of topics was a riba. This was the next one I did. So basically this one I led, and this one was quite a good one. So in this one, basically all I really did was try and introduce to the people, because the idea was I wanted to introduce to the people what riba is, what kinds of riba exist, and essentially how Bitcoin can help Muslims get out of riba. And
Okay.
interestingly enough, we actually had some non-Muslims who attended as well, because they just attended and want to know more about it, I guess. And it was a very good discussion actually, because they were even taking part in the conversation. They were engaging. They even like I said, agreed. And I think I've noticed that a lot with Kufar. When they listen to the Sharia and it's explained to them, they get it, because it's obvious. I mean, they may say, "Oh, I want to do it anyway." I mean, just like they'll say, "Yeah, I understand." Just like a person will say, "I understand that alcohol is bad. I understand that cigarette is bad, but I should be able to smoke if I want to or drink if I want to." I mean, we get that.
Hmm.
But no one can really deny that what Islam says in terms of Islamic judicial law and how they all get the reasons for it, and they
Okay.
understand it. And especially comes to the issue of riba, they all understood it. One of them was like, "Yeah, but why can't you charge, for the service of providing capital?"
Mm.
So I explained, if you want to make money, then invest, take on the risk, share the risk. Why should I bear the brunt of all the risk and you get none of the risk? Like I said, once that was explained to them, it was like, yeah, actually, that makes that. They would say that's more fair. That's the very least they could say. Yeah, it is a more fairer system. But they might not
Yeah.
agree. They might not agree that it's wrong, but they definitely agree that it's definitely a fairer system.
Yeah, one thing I noticed whenever like I talk about like Islamic finance or riba on Twitter, I find that a lot of actually non-Muslims are almost just as interested as Muslims when it comes to kind of like that intersection between Bitcoin and Islamic finance. And like you said, when you explain it to them, especially the risk sharing aspect, that's when it kind of clicks for them, because you're like you explain to them how currently how loans operate, especially under fractional reserve banking. It's like all the risk is being taken on by the retailer and none by the actual by the person issuing the debt or by
Yeah.
the bank. So like when you explain it to them that, Islam seeks to have a just system where, they're both parties that are involved in the contract share that risk. And when you explain it to them in that way, that's when it starts clicking and that's when they start getting it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's. I mean, we all know Islam is in line with the fitra. Islam is in line with the natural disposition of human beings, and by that definition, when people are exposed to Islam, they will see it's fair. Like I even had a discussion with one brother about the issue of freedom of speech.
Hmm.
So the question was, why can't I say what I want to say if I'm not harming anyone? And I said, well, that's the point. If you are harming someone in Islam, then Islam steps in and says, no, you can't do that.
Hmm.
And they'll say, okay, but what harm can words do? And I said, well, if someone said that started to spread rumors that your daughter was having inappropriate sexual activities in back alleys with men and it's spread into the community, I'm sure you're not gonna be happy with that, and I'm sure you want that to stop, and you sure you want that to be compensated for that, for the damage that's gonna be done to your family, your reputation of your daughter. How you gonna get her married off, and everyone thinks this is how she is. When you frame it that way and explain to
Hmm.
them the why, they get it. I mean, they will actually get it more than you. They're like, okay, if they did that, I'll do more than just sanction them. I'll beat the crap out of them. But that's the thing. People have principles, but in practice they have Islam. That's how I feel it. I feel it's like this. People have principles and have ideals, but in on the ground, the reality is they want Islam.
Yeah,
That's how I see it.
and going back to the riba point, I mean, I like to frame it in that it's not just like, Muslims aren't the only ones that were addressing it, because like historically it was like all religions kind of, they
Yeah,
they
yeah,
banned or
yeah,
placed
yeah,
restrictions on usury. So like
Yeah,
this
yeah,
new thing where usury is allowed throughout the world is a very new thing, actually. That's like the
yeah, yeah.
that's kind of like a weird thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually the anomaly, yeah. Because I'm actually, I was part of the book I'm working on. I was actually going to have a chapter on quotes from right throughout history with regards to riba. And like you said, I have almost 20 pages of quotes from people from BC to AD. You know, throughout the whole ages. You know, in religious texts from Hinduism, Buddhism, all of it, all of them say the same thing.
Exactly.
And then,
Yeah.
you have to ask yourself, a question. Why is it throughout time everyone has seen interest as being the exact same evil that we see today? What Islam says it is. It's not an unusual thing. It's obvious. It's
Agreed.
obvious. It's just that
Yeah.
now today it's an anomaly because it's like we struggle to see how life would exist outside of it because everything is based on it. So that's just the only challenge is that it's everywhere.
Right, right. I said I'm really glad that like people that are into Bitcoin are starting to wake up to that fact. And even not just like Muslims, but also people of other faiths, especially. Like we even see like, Christians that are in the Bitcoin space that are kind of like waking up to the fact that like, oh yeah, this usury thing was actually banned at one point. And they start to kind of like
Yeah.
investigate it because, we Muslims are very loud about it. We may not have before Bitcoin, we may not have had the best solutions to kind of counteract riba, but we're loud about it, and that kind of makes people of other faith question why usury is allowed today, especially in their beliefs and their religious faiths.
And what you mentioned is a very good point there, actually, about the issue of having the tools to combat it, because that's actually the biggest problem. Is that as much as we want to say gold is a solution, we have to also acknowledge that gold is part of the problem.
Mm,
The only reason why we have fiat in the first place is because of the failings of gold and the inability of gold to be transacted across space and time. I mean, you can transfer value across time, from holding value, but across space is terrible.
yeah.
So you need eventually at some point some form of certificate issuance or liabilities where you transfer the debt of the gold, and this is where it creeps in. And
Yeah.
the only property that Bitcoin has to solve that is the fact that you don't need to issue a certificate anymore. The whole idea of paper Bitcoin is a dumb idea. You don't. There's no need for it.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of, that points to a thing that I talk about like certain monies having like a anti-riba property where like gold, I mean, for a while it worked. Like historically, societies use gold without usury, because, you could trust third parties to not like do fractional reserves or issue riba. But over time, eventually, no matter no matter how many times you try to adopt a gold standard, it's always going to come out to the same thing, which is what we have today in fiat, where it's you need to trust a third party in order to transact with gold over large distances, and that's kind of the issue. Just to kind of echo your point, no matter how many times you try to institute a gold standard, it's always going to come out to the same result, where you end up having to trust third parties, and those third parties are always going to be tempted to issue riba. Like no matter how many times you try to go back to a gold standard, it's going to end up coming with the same outcome. And this is the neat thing about Bitcoin, because it's a very new thing where you don't actually have to issue paper certificates against Bitcoin. You can actually transact in the asset itself.
So I mean, in terms of the issue of like I said, the issue of riba, that was basically the main issue I was talking about is how it manifests itself, how it works in the system and in the banking, and essentially what I was trying to say was that Bitcoin, essentially what it can do is number one, it opens up new avenues and new tools to interact with each other. So for example, you can use things like multi-signature wallets or to have a transaction. So you can have contracts with people where you lock in the funds and then the funds is released once it's delivery. Even like in terms of currency swaps, when you want to send money from one country to the other country, again, as you know, that's the instantaneous thing. You don't need debts or liabilities to achieve that. You can just achieve it instantly, and on a list of other things. So that was the topic we had on riba.
Hmm.
That took place on that one. And then finally before the lunch break, so there was two. There was one I was interested in, but I didn't attend. It was to do with women in mining or women in the industry of Bitcoin and mining. I thought that was interesting. I was gonna go there and just say, look, I asked them, why do you think that women are not in crypto? Because I don't know any man who says you can't come. So it must be. It's
Right.
not, I don't think it's us as a problem.
Mm.
But I didn't attend that one anyway. But there was one lady who was going there, and I asked her, and she said she reckons it's to do with risk. She said that women don't take risks. Men are very risk taking. So essentially, what she's saying is that if Bitcoin can become less risky and less obscure and opaque, then women will be more involved in the space, which sounds fair to me. Sounds to
Hmm.
make sense.
Right.
But the other thing that I actually did attend was to do with funding. So basically, one individual wanted to have a discussion about how can we fund the devs or the Bitcoin devs, essentially saying that Bitcoin, everyone tries to get success on the coattails of Bitcoin. All these cryptocurrencies and say, yeah, we're crypto, we're Bitcoin, we like Bitcoin, blah blah. So they try and get the successes of Bitcoin, but none of them reinvest into the success of Bitcoin. So not the exchanges, not the shitcoins, none of them. So essentially, they've got all their VC money, all their money flowing into them, and they have all their devs and that kind of stuff. Whereas Bitcoin, we're still just doing stuff feasibility on our own, and not really having any kind of thing. So basically, basically there was discussion about is it possible to have some kind of funding or some kind of way to raise funds for devs to keep on developing the Bitcoin network? Because at the end of the day, it's gonna go forward, but it's just that it's highly underfunded. Basically, I was basically in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, especially for Bitcoin, where you don't have like a centralized company that's like issuing coins, like you see with a lot of other crypto projects. And even if other crypto projects are Bitcoin friendly, they're primarily going to focus on developing their own coin rather than trying to develop and make Bitcoin, or I guess paying developers to develop on Bitcoin, because why would they waste their money on that? They're competing with Bitcoin. They may not say it, but they are competing with Bitcoin. So really, it goes against their interests to help pay for the developers to develop on Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's true, but in the same breath, it's definitely things like exchanges. They could do a lot more because exchanges. I mean, what would an exchange be without Bitcoin? I mean, could you even imagine a Bitcoin an exchange that's not Bitcoin? I mean, I guess if you say like DEXs, like Uniswap and
Hmm.
stuff, which is like they're only one coin only, so they're all basically they are either ERC20 token platform or whatnot. But on terms of centralized exchanges, then definitely they should be able to pull up their socks and do something. But yeah, like you said,
Yeah,
there's always a complete competing interest. Even
yeah,
centralized exchanges have their own coins and have their own business model. So
yeah.
it is what it is. It is what it is. But what it was interesting that I learned from that discussion though was actually not to do with that topic. It was there was a ETH developer that was there and he was talking about how he's developed or why still loves Bitcoin and has Bitcoin and hopes all the success in Bitcoin. What he's interested in is just developing something different. It's not like
Mm,
he disagrees with what Bitcoiners are doing, but Bitcoiners are doing. He just has a different. It's like it's like saying I understand you want to build a house, but I want to build a car.
hmm.
Basically, what he's saying. I know a house is important. I know we all need to live in a house, but I'm interested in building a car.
All
That's
right.
one of the reasons which made sense to me why some people when I say to them why don't you build on Bitcoin rather than build on some shitcoin, it makes sense now why someone would do that because they don't deny that Bitcoin is important. They're just interested in something else.
Yeah.
And this particular person actually had a patent on some kind of technology they wanted to develop. So that's his passion is in his patent and his idea from even before Bitcoin.
Okay. I mean, it does seem like a waste of time to, try to develop the technology of transferring value, which is, like what Bitcoin is. And it just seems like a waste of time to develop it on another coin. But if that's what he
No,
wants
no,
to
he
do,
it isn't. No, that's the thing. He's not doing that though. He's saying so. For example, I think it was something to do with. So essentially, what he's saying was that the Bitcoin network deals with the world and
mm,
with everyone, but he's more specific on a certain niche. For example, imagine you want to develop some kind of ability for two people to do some kind of game amongst themselves. Like, I'm just trying to make it up in my head. I don't know what he was, but it's something like a
right.
small niche thing. Not to do something that affect everyone. It's something that only affect a small number of people. It
Okay.
makes sense. For example, like stocks. Imagine like trading stocks. That's not something that would involve the whole world. It only involves traders.
Right.
That's a very niche thing. And it's not to do with Bitcoin itself. Does that make sense? So it's not
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
what he's saying is that not everything's about the transfer of money. There are other things that people want to do that's not to do with transfer of money. And I get that. I mean, even myself,
Yeah.
I'm trying to develop an online marketplace. So
Hmm.
that means people, advertising their goods, people buying their goods. That's not necessarily Bitcoin. I mean, yeah, you're using money to transfer, but that's something else that makes sense. That's user interface, experience, managing accounts, doing logins. That's something a bit different than Bitcoin. So I get
Okay.
that he has something else he wants to do. So, but yeah, it was a great guy, man. He has some good info, inside Ethereum info,
Okay.
the inside scoop on these things. But yeah, so then we had lunch, and then I think we had a few other topics. Wasn't really anything important really that I can think of. Oh, because there was something else I want to get to. What else was it? I'm looking at the list. What one did I attend after lunch? Future of crypto, no. Longevity, CBDC. I missed that one. I can't think of which one it is. Financial blockchain. Yeah, I'm not sure which one it is. So anyway, there was two other topics that I can't remember which one I attended because it was like a few weeks ago now, and I can't see none of the things on the list reminds me of anything. But
Mm.
what I did do, I want to get to that point, is that I offered on the group if anyone wants to go and visit a masjid, So we hooked up and arranged for a visitation to the masjid. So I communicated with the Dubai Islamic Center. Apparently, it's the largest Islamic center in UAE,
Oh wow.
and it's something like a couple thousand shahadas they get a year. They get the largest number of shahadas a year. It's a big setup. I was in the office actually when I was there as well. It's quite a big setup.
Wow.
And even when I was there, like non-Muslims were walking in, asking questions just out of the blue. So yeah, they're quite active. Anyway, so they got some people, and it was mashallah. I'm again not saying names, but there's some well-known people in the industry. They wanted to go and look at masjid, so I took them on board, got a car, drove them there, and it was a good experience, alhamdulillah. So first we got there. There's some ladies that were with us, some men that were with us. They got them some abayas and some hijabs to wear before we went to the masjid.
Hmm.
And then they gave like a little presentation. What is Islam? Like basic pillars of Islam. And we got to sit down. They got to ask some questions about Islam. What was interesting, funny enough, that one of them was told told, one of the attendees was told in a by Imam in Malaysia, one of the pillars of Islam, one of the five pillars of Islam, something like that, is not to eat pork. And Em was like, nah, where did you get that from? That's not a pillar, sorry. And then someone said, but why can't you eat pork? So, and then I mentioned one of the things I said, Allah mentioned you can't eat pork, and we accept that as it is. And it wasn't mentioned why. We can
Mm,
speculate as to the why. And I mentioned that if you look at meat across the board and animals, there was a YouTube video I came across, and they mentioned that could you eat meat raw? And it mentioned that with fish generally speaking, you can eat meat raw because that's how
mm,
fishes are.
mhm,
With goats and sheep and cows, you can eat the meat raw, but you can't if you puncture the stomach, the gut, that could contaminate the meat and you can get sick. So there are bacteria in the gut that can poison you or make you sick. But as for the meat itself, it's fine. But as for pork and even chicken, then you need to cook it. You can't have it raw because it has parasites and bacteria in it that are harmful to human beings. So I said, if you look at that on the scale of things, it lines up quite well with Islam. So we
mm,
have the hadith, "Huwa tahuru ma'uhu al-hillu maytatuh." So Allah Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that even dead things in the sea are halal to eat. So everything in the sea you can eat it, which
mhm,
is in line with what they just said that any meat in the sea you can eat raw. It's fine. It's not harmful. So we can see that fishes by default, whether they're dead or alive, they're not harmful.
mm,
And then we see like the cattle, the sheeps and the cows and the camels and whatnot. Then again, you can long as you slaughter it properly, you can eat it. Just be careful of the gut or not. And but you can see here why we need to slaughter still. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum with the pork, for example, then that's prohibited. And
mm,
likewise, even on a medical level, you can't eat pork raw because it's dangerous. It kill you. It has worms inside it and all sorts of stuff.
mm,
So and even chickens, like the Hanafis, they have the rule that if you're gonna eat chicken, the chicken has to eat halal food for 3 days
mhm,
or clean food, so not halal food, clean food for 3 days before you eat it, so it can flush your system out of all nastiness. So the point is that it's very possible that the correlation between what we can eat is down to hygiene
mm.
and how harmful the animal is. Not to mention that you can't really slaughter a pig; it has no neck. But yeah.
Ah,
Anyway,
interesting. Okay.
it was an
Uh,
interesting discussion, and then we went downstairs and we had some coffee and dates and had a further chit chat about Islam, asked some questions about Islam. One of them asked, "What would Muslims say if at some point in the future we can live forever? Then would there be hellfire and paradise if you don't actually ever die?"
mm,
And then the guy said, "There's an Arab saying: when we see it, we'll give it a name." Meaning that when it happens, then we'll talk about it because this is all like speculation.
right,
When you can prove you can do it, then we'll chat about it. But until then, why worry ourselves with stuff like that we may never happen?
right.
I think that's a good answer. I think that's a good answer because I don't believe it's possible to live forever anyway. But
Yeah, yeah,
that's I do believe you probably extend your life quite a long time, but you
right.
can't prevent death. I don't. That's there's too many things that can go wrong.
I wanted to ask you
And
how many people did you get from the conference to come to the
oh,
Islamic Center?
yeah, so even before I even say that, one interesting thing is that before we even got into the car to go there, one of them approached me and said, "Yeah, I want to become Muslim." And I was
Oh.
like, "Yeah, that's great," because he said that his wife or whatnot, or other half, she's Muslim, but she's not practicing at all, like off the rails.
Hmm.
So, and her dad actually wants him to be Muslim to fix his daughter. She's mad, isn't it? But
Oh
subhanAllah,
wow.
that's
Okay.
I'll tell you, Allah's guidance comes from places you'd never anticipate, bro. So
Right.
he's been reading about Islam anyway, so he's already interested in Islam anyway. That's one reason why I'm come along. So I was interested in aspect of news to hear that he was interested in becoming Muslim, and why not, whatnot. So hopefully, inshallah, makes it easy for him in
Okay.
his transition because I know it's difficult being a Muslim in a non-Muslim country, especially if you're a new Muslim, because then you got to somehow find connection with other Muslims, and if you're on your own, then that's really really rough.
Yeah, yeah, it can definitely be tough being a revert in the West, and your only hope is to maybe go to your local masjid, and then you also have to hope that there's people out there that are willing to reach out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what I would say for myself. That was one of my biggest blessings is that when I became Muslim, it was in college. So I basically found the prayer room. So outside of lessons, I was in the prayer room, and we obviously had a little mini community there, which made friends. And then from those friends, went to Friday circles, Friday lectures, and whatnot, and conferences. And then the circle built from there.
Okay.
But if I became Muslim, like in our workplace, for example,
Hmm.
where there most likely is not, there's no ISOC there, or there's no Islamic society there, or whatnot, then I can imagine it being a bit rough. You're surrounded by non-Muslims. You go home as non-Muslims. You on the street as non-Muslims. It's like you're the only one.
Hmm.
Other than maybe Jummah, I might see a few Muslims here and there. Then it can be a bit rough. I can imagine.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially if you're in a relationship with someone and you've come to Islam and they haven't. That's also very rough.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It can be tough, but alhamdulillah. I mean, it sounded like this guy was thinking about it for a long time, and then he looks like he took his shahada right
No,
there
he
with you.
didn't do it there.
Oh, okay.
He didn't do it there. He said he was going to do it when he's going back. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
thought, fair enough, that's fine. But he came along and he asked some good questions. Everyone asked good questions, to be honest. I mean, alhamdulillah, it was a good give and take from the people that were there. The Islamic Society gave him some books and the Quran, and they gave him a CD. And I said, bruv, who does CDs, man? Why are you giving CDs,
Oh
bruv?
man.
We don't have the drive for anymore.
Oh, that's funny.
I said, no, don't worry. There's a QR code. You get all the data online anyway. I said, yeah, that's what you need to just stick to QR codes, bro. No one needs CDs these days. That's it. But yeah, that was essentially that was that one. Oh, so is there anything else happened that was interesting there? Oh yeah, and one of the guys, again, not mentioning names, but he's definitely well known. When we were leaving, the adhan from Maghrib went, and he deliberately said, "Look, I want to stay here. I want to hear this guy. I like hearing it." I was like, "Mashallah." It's no, because the thing is, if you're gonna ask to go to a masjid, for me personally, there has to be a reason for that.
Hmm.
Something is there in your head. Whether it's just curiosity or not, but for me, you don't go to a religious place unless there's some interest there. Even if it's a small, tiny spark or just curiosity, there's something there that would make you want to go there. For sure,
Right.
maybe Allah makes it develop and grow. Who knows? But I know how it is when I first became Muslim. That time it took from knowing to believing took a while.
Mm.
It took a while, and it's not through knowledge. It's something else needs to happen in the heart for it to happen. So inshallah, Allah make
Right.
it easy for all of them.
Inshallah.
That was really pretty much it, really. So other than that,
Okay.
we were just chilling, had food, met some people. I met someone there who established, I think, the first Bitcoin exchange ever back in 2000 and, I think, 11 or 12, something like that.
Oh wow.
So proper OGs from way back in the day that were there. Told me some funny stories. But yeah, that was it, man.
I guess circling back to your presentation that you gave about riba, I wanted to ask you, how did you, given that you had a not primarily non-Muslim audience, I guess there were also some Muslims there. How did you go about explaining what riba is? Because I know, like, the topic of explaining, if someone asks you what is riba, that can be a complicated question, and it could be very specific and very detailed if you want the answer to be that way. But how did you go about answering that question of
Yeah,
what is riba?
first and foremost, there was about one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. There's about 10 or 11 people that were there, and I think majority of them were Muslim.
Okay.
Majority of them were Muslim. There's only two people there that weren't Muslim. But in terms of explaining it, I mean, first thing I did was explain the issue of currency. What is currency?
Hmm.
And what can become currency. So starting from the issue of the fungibility of things. So if something is fungible, then essentially it can be used as a medium of exchange because every unit is the same as the other unit. So, a glass
Hmm.
of water, two glasses of water are the same. I mean, they're technically the same thing. And if I exchange one for the other one, you can say it's practically the same. So we can understand whereby we look at the things that are ribawi. You find it's not just gold and silver, also includes things like wheat, salt, dates, because they could be used as a medium of exchange because they can be stored for a long period of time and they can be
Hmm.
used to exchange things. I can say, give me a cup or a bag of wheat and flour that can be used very, very granularly to do an exchange. But fundamentally, other than that, so if that's the case, you can't, when you exchange those things, they must be spot. They have to be done that immediately. You can't have any delay. And if there is a delay, I mean, and if you are lending, then it has to be the same. If you give, it has to be back the same. You
Hmm.
can't have any increase. I mean, it's pretty much straightforward. But
Okay.
obviously, when it comes to analogies, essentially we have to draw parallels to what we have today. So essentially, things like money exchange. So when I send money from one place to the other place, it's not instant in reality. It takes
Hmm.
time. And then you have liabilities. So for example, you have this thing called FX swaps as an example. An FX swap. So the way it works, for example, is if I have business in the UK and I have a branch in France, for example, and I have staff in France and that need to be paid, but I'm charging people in pounds. Yeah. So I get
Hmm.
paid in France, francs, or also euros. On my balance sheet, it's pounds, but I still have to pay someone next week, 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time back in francs. So I could do what's called an FX swap, whereby the money is swapped now for spot price, and we agree on a swap in the future. There's a double swap.
Mm.
That's called an FX swap. Islamically, that's not allowed. You can't do currency transfers that are delayed. It has to be
Mm.
done immediately, which is ironically because right now they just discovered that it's estimated about 40 to 50 trillion dollars of debt on FX swaps that they didn't realize was there until recently. So
Oh wow.
the global debt that exists in the world, they knew that, and they just discovered that these FX swaps, they were off balance sheet. So when companies report their earnings, these liabilities are not on the balance sheet.
Oh
So they
wow.
just discovered, can you imagine, they discovered 40 to 50 trillion dollars of debt liabilities on these FX swaps that they didn't know existed until just recently. And even
Wow.
on that, they don't know the exact amount because it's off balance sheet. And if it's a private company, they're not obliged to tell you.
Right, exactly. You're not going to get an
So,
exact amount for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, what we're looking at here is essentially you're tying the economy economy on the sequence of events which can cause the collapse of the whole system. That's essentially what debt does and what riba does. It
Right.
ties your economy in such a way that number one, it's hard to know what's happening. Number two, it artificially inflates the prices of goods and services because essentially you're providing money that doesn't really exist yet. You bring it from the future to the present, and you're distorting prices. That was basically the main messages, is that the ill effects of riba in terms of distorting the prices, in terms of the instability of the market, the
Okay.
uncertainty of the market. I don't actually know what's actually going on, what's actually happening right now, how much money is available, how much money do I owe. I don't know. I mean, imagine this. If you take this out, bro. Imagine you're doing business with someone
Hmm.
and they say we're going to pay you next week. Now they were confident they're going to pay you next week because they got the money. They didn't realize that the bank that is holding their money paid to another bank, paid the liability to another bank who went bust. So five banks down the line, they've gone bust, which caused another to go bust, which caused another to go bust, which affects me. You've
Hmm.
got a cascading effect of destruction, basically, based on this house of cards, you could say. That's why literally it is. I mean, this whole system literally is a house of cards. There's
Yeah.
no actual accurate way to describe it.
Yeah, that's the way I like to kind of explain I guess the negative aspects of riba is that you need a network of banks to kind of prop up that riba, and the only way you can kind of keep that house of cards going is by printing money in order to kind of keep the debt or the interest payments up. Like you need the boom bust cycles, and you need currency printing in order to prop up that riba system.
And the joke is the probably the best analogy to bring of this system is it's like musical chairs, isn't
Yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah. That's a very good analogy, actually. Yeah.
Everyone is
Okay.
hoping the music doesn't stop because once the music has stopped, someone is going to be left standing,
Yeah.
and that person who's left standing could bring everyone else down.
Right. Okay.
So with
Yeah.
Islamic finance or with the Islamic way of doing business, I guess you could say the way the Islamic system of finance works is that everyone needs to have a chair. So if
Hmm.
the music does stop, we can all sit down.
Right.
That's how I would say it. The musical chairs in Islam means everyone in the game must have a chair to sit on. If something does collapse or stop, we all have something to sit on. Their system is they play this game musical chairs, and longer the music plays, the more chairs are being removed from the table. So it's like first there was like five people and four chairs. Now there's like two chairs. Now there's like only one chair, and it's like, bro, who's gonna get the last chair?
Yeah.
They've run out of chairs. That's their problem, man. And it's not gonna last long. I don't know how they're gonna get out of it, but I
Yeah.
think that's why it's a good thing we've got Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
exactly. Alhamdulillah for Bitcoin. And I think Alan Faring said this in one of his presentations that he gave. He said, Islamic finance is what would happen on a sound money standard. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
there's nothing inherently special or weird about Islamic finance. That's just what would happen on a hard money standard. And I think Islamic finance would happen and flourish on a Bitcoin standard. At least that's my hope.
That's the hope. Yeah, that's definitely the
Yeah.
hope. And I think that was one of the things that the Muslims who were there they were interested to know. What alternatives do they have? What could you do differently? Because of some of these people have portfolios to manage. Some of them are managed family offices and whatnot. And I
Hmm.
said, look, with Bitcoin, there's a lot of things you can do. It's just that you need to change your mindset and how you approach business. Rather than approaching business from the aspect of credit, you start approaching business from the aspect of investment and capital. So, for example, if I said to you, here's £500,000 and go and buy a house, that thinking is not the same as if I said to you, here's a loan of £500,000 to buy a house. A loan to buy a house is not the same as you using your own capital to buy a house. You would
Hmm.
think twice about spending all your money on the house. You might even say, you know what, I'll just buy a £200,000 house and have the other
Hmm.
half in investment
Hmm.
because I'm not going to spend all my money on a house. But if it's a loan, you would do that.
Hmm.
So when a credit mind thinking is not the same as a sound money type of thinking. Your mindset is completely different. How you
Right.
behave, how you operate, how you plan, how you take risks, it's all completely different.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into the whole time preference thing where like, if you're on a debt-based currency, your time preference is going to be very high, whereas being on a hard money or sound money standard, your time preference will be low. You'll be thinking more about the future than you are
Yeah,
of the present. So, yeah, okay.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. That's just I saw Lop's summary of Islamic finance and that kind of made me wonder how you explain that. So, thank you for shedding light on that.
Okay, then. So essentially, the event came to an end. There was Monday. There was some activity that was going ahead. I didn't really get to take part in many of them because I had other things I had to do. But beyond that, yeah, it kind of came to an end, and we're all still very much in contact. Those who took part. So there's a group that we have. We chat, exchange things, and we're still working on changing the world, inshallah. So hopefully we can all do some good things moving forward.
Okay, inshallah. That sounds like it was a very fun event, and I'm kind of sad that I didn't get to attend. But inshallah, maybe next year or something.
Inshallah, inshallah. Maybe if they have it in Saudi.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
So,
All right.
yeah. Do you have any other closing thoughts about your attendance at the Satoshi Roundtable?
Not really. There was not much else to really report.
Okay.
I'll definitely advise everyone to read the report from Jameson Lott. He attended different. Some of the events he attended was different than mine, and he had a different take on it. And there's definitely something worth learning from. Because like I said, the whole point of it is to learn from other people what they have to say and what they contribute. And there definitely was a lot to contribute from different people, different aspects and whatnot.
All right. Alhamdulillah. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Muawiyah Tucker. I really appreciate your summary and explaining what went on during the Satoshi Roundtable. Thank you for that.
جزاك الله خير anytime. جزاك الله خير.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.